Thank you very much. I don't need my earphones right now. Thank you for the translation. I'm very, very sorry I cannot address you in Portuguese. I think it's a lovely language. I've had the pleasure of listening to it, of course, also from home from time to time. But even now that I can see how much you gesture and how much you talk with your body also, it's wonderful to see. So thank you very much for having me. I work with the Danish court administration. I had the fine introduction before, and what I want to share with you is a couple of things that we do in Denmark when we work with communication in our court administration. So this will not be one sort of theme from one end to another. It will be sort of dips into various things that we did in the hope that some of them may resonate with you, so you may find some of them interesting. So that's how I'm going to play this. And the first thing I could show you is that just recently there was a survey done within Europe, within the ENCJ, of which we in Denmark are a member of, and you as well. You are also a member of that. And what the question was how do you even feel about the media? Do you feel that they respect you? Do you remember the answer? This is the picture that we all are included in this picture, and Portugal is right down in the middle. I can tell you that approximately 40% of the judges that answered, maybe that was some of you. Did any of you participate in this survey? Please hands up. No? A couple. All right. Well, you and many other Portuguese judges participated in this, and 40% of the participants did not feel that the media respected them. Now 40% is quite a lot, and you could think this is only in Portugal, but this is definitely not only in Portugal, it's all over Europe. So the findings, and that's what I wanted to bring to you from the media, is that the decision is large and it is increasing. That's a very important finding, I think. The other finding was that 34% of all participating judges feel that the judiciary is not respected by traditional media. Another very important finding. So if one could ask the question, is it even important? Why do we want to talk about communication, and why do we want to talk about the media? This is why. This is the judges throughout Europe who says this. It's you, your colleagues, my colleagues, everywhere in Europe. This is how we feel. This is not someone from the media who told us this. This is how we ourselves said how we felt. So that's why I think it's important. That leads me to the question, then how could we go about this? What should that tell us? And did you ever hear the question that we are, or the sentence that we are in an ivory tower? Are you familiar with that expression? Yes. Yes. So we sit up there and we are fine and we're smart and we can do everything a lot better than a lot of other people, and we're the intellectuals and we get things. So what is it that they don't get, the journalists or the public or whoever it is that don't get it? And that's a very good question, because actually we do provide justice each and every day. Each and every day we provide justice. That is somehow the most valuable thing that we can contribute to the society. I can't think of a better thing to be contributed to a society, because if no one did that, there would be no growth. There would be no development. So it's fundamental what we do. And we haven't, the respect that we deserve has always come rather without doing anything about it. Didn't have to do anything because we talked through the justice that we provided. But maybe times are evolving so that people don't know as much as they used to what it is that we actually provide. And how we provide it, what value we provide. Maybe that's part of the reason that they can perceive us as being in the ivory tower. Maybe it's because they don't know actually how we work or how we do things. And maybe also we should ask the other way around. Do we know how they are? Do we know how they work? Do we appreciate the conditions that they work under when they should write about us or meet before us in our courts? And I'm sure that we want to, but maybe we should ask a little more. Or maybe we should be a little more curious when we do that. Or maybe we could systemize that. And so what I'm getting at is maybe that transparency that we could work through could actually make sure that we have the respect that you deserve and that the whole justice system deserve. And maybe if the journalists understood how we worked a little bit better, they could also cover the things that we do a little bit better. Or maybe if we appreciated the things that they do and the restrictions and the demands that they are under, we could easier help them to facilitate the things that they must do for us. Because on the heart, we need them, the journalists, don't we? We cannot make do without them. We work through our judgments, we work through our decisions, we talk through our decisions. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, that's who we are. But if no one had the urge to write about what we did, or if no one had the urge to discuss whether this was a good sentence or not, then not many people would actually hear about our decisions, would they? Because not very ordinary people would read our decisions and discuss and debate them. So it is to the mutual benefit that the journalists write about the decisions that we make, not about us as persons, but the things that we do. So that's my thesis, that we could use the transparency and we could use our curiosity to learn more about the others. And learning about the others and how the conditions for the others are, it will be easier to provide justice for us, and it would be easier to understand how they are, and vice versa. So that's sort of my overall claim, and I'm going to give you just a couple of examples on how you could do that. It says both internally and externally, because the others are, today we are the ones, the others are the one in the swimming pool. Tomorrow when you go back to your court are the one, everyone else are the others. So regarding on who you are, the others, you always define yourself as you, with whoever you are with, and then the others. And so the others, who are they? The others could be in you as a judge, or you in your courtroom, or you in your whole court, or it could be the president of the court, or it could be the court administration in this instance. And what we did in Denmark was that we actually now provide management information on these things that I have written down here. We tell people how many cases did come into the court, how many cases were concluded during the same period. What did that tell us about the case handling time? How about the productivity? You could do that on the individual judge. We don't. But we do it on the individual court. And like in Portugal, we have many courts. So just for the fun of it, how many of you know for your court how many cases you had come in last month? Please, hands up. Yeah? Very good. How many know how many were concluded last month? Same. Good. But there were a lot of hands that didn't go up there. Maybe that's an idea to work with. Internally, we use it in Denmark so that the individual court may see towards the other courts how is their productivity and how can they where do they need more judges, or where do they need more clerks, or where do they need more whatever it is in order to facilitate a more smooth go-through. But that's for the internal use, and I think that's a viable thing in itself. But we also, and I'm sure you can't read this, and it doesn't matter, because all I wanted to do with this picture is show you that we actually put it on our website also. So we communicate it externally also. Everyone, you could also, but you could probably not understand it, but everyone can go in and see it. Now, why on earth would we do that? Many of these figures are red, because they don't, many of our courts don't always get the number of cases done that they should, if they should sort of keep up the level and not work on a backlog. So we do this because we believe that the transparency is the best, and we believe that the journalists, often they will call me and they will say, what about this? You didn't even meet this, you're working on a backlog problem. And I can go, yes, we are. It's on the website. It's been on the website for 5 years. You can track, you can see it's becoming a little bit better. We haven't solved it yet. We haven't cracked it. Or for this and this court, you're right, they had a very, very big case. It took up 3 judges for I don't know how many months. So of course we're working on a backlog for that court now. So it's sort of like it takes the air out of it, we would say in Danish. So I'm now just translating it into English. So that's one example. You can also ask questions to the professionals. So you could ask the professionals that are in your courts, how do they feel about you? Because that curiosity could actually help you maybe communicate better with them and make their life easier, and hence their satisfaction or their discovery of the justice in your country or in your courtroom more significant. So that's another factor you could work with. I think you can also ask the public. I will not dwell on that. And you could also share knowledge internally. In Denmark there are 4 big areas. There's the penal cases, there's the civil cases, we have the bailiff's court cases, and we have when you are dead and deceased and you have the estate that you must deliver. Those are our 4 big areas. And within those 4 big areas, we have groups of judges from different courts. They discuss within themselves what is a good topic to share knowledge about. And once they've done that, they will write down the essentials that they wanted to. It could be about payment to the attorneys, or it could be about the sentences for heroin, selling of heroin, or it could be a completely different thing. They will write that down and they will discuss it among themselves until they're satisfied. And once they're satisfied, they will put the stamp on it. And the stamp, you can see it's on the top. So that's the sort of the approval stamp. And then it goes on our intranet. So everyone within the Danish courts can see it. And this should very much, the purpose is of course to strive towards a higher quality and to strive towards more equality between the courts. So that if one court sentenced this, the other courts would sentence the same for the same thing. So those are the 2 objectives of this project. And it works the way that there is never just one person doing this. It's always a group of people. And it does not get the stamp of approval if it's not okayed by all the members of the group. And that should help, because one judge in itself, it can be a little bit scary to go out there in front of everyone saying, okay, I feel this. But it's a lot safer if you've discussed it in a group, and the group was not only within one court, but within many courts. So that's one way that we also work with transparency and communications within the courts. I will give you another example. Within the family law, we had the case that a lot of practice was different from court to court. Mind you, it was all within the law. Nothing was wrong with it, everything was within the law. But they did practice it very different. So some had children expert to be part of the case. Some swore that this should never be an issue. Some courts heard the child, some courts never did. Some courts swore that mediation was the best thing, court mediation in this particular type of cases, and other courts swore that exactly court mediation in this type of cases was not a good thing. So it was all within the law, but it was very, very unequal from court to court. And we wanted to do something about that, and we put together a group, and again it was a group of one judge from every court of Denmark, of the lower instances, the city courts, not the Supreme Court. They had a number of meetings and they discussed within themselves what was a good idea, how did they, and what was the reason that this court did that and this court did that, and they were both firm believers that they did the best thing for the parties and the best thing for the children. And out of that came a draft, it's a draft still, but a draft for a guideline that comprise now 4 different ways of going about how to handle a family law case. I use this as an example to further work across the courts and to further the consistency between the courts. Now these, it's 24, we have 24 city courts in Denmark, so these 24 judges, they are now at a stage where they have found a good way, they are all aligned that these 4 models may be used, and they have a very, very seriously task now of telling this to all the other judges of their own court, and so that all the other courts of all the courts may, hopefully within the next 9 months, agree to these 4 models, and then we can start. Full stop, new subject, still communication. Communication requires, obviously, that you find out what it is that you want to discuss. And we in Denmark, we have made a strategy for this, and the goals that we have is that we want to tell about the court's adjudication, and we want to ensure contemporary and understandable letters and adjudications in the decisions. Those are the 2 that I have highlighted. Forget the rest. Those 2 highlights just for now. Now, why did we do that? We do that obviously because, like we started saying, courts are the decisions that we make are who we are. We talk through our decisions. We are our decisions. So we must make sure that at least the parties and the lawyers can understand what we write. Now we have talked a lot about that. One aspect is actually how we write the judgment. How do we write it? In what kind of language do we write it? Should we write it differently depending on who the parties were? And obviously the answer to that must be no. The answer cannot be that we write different decisions depending on who the parties were. But the answer could be that we must think very carefully about how we phrase it, how long our sentences are, what language do we use. And we found out in Denmark that if we want most of the Danes to understand what we say, I'm not saying everyone, I'm saying most of the Danes, they will understand the judgments if the sentence is between 15 and 18 words. If it's more than 18, our language specialists tell us that a lot of people will not be able to understand it anymore. If it's less, they also say that you will lose a lot of the complexity that you actually need because we're dealing with very complex cases. I'm not going to translate this into Portuguese because I wouldn't know whether it would be the same or not. But this was, when we made this study, the judges almost fell down their chairs. That's another Danish expression. What is this thing with sentences and how many words we can use in each sentence? But little by little, they actually took it in and they understand it now and they work very much with it. And as a result, during the last 10 years, because this is 10 years old research, during the last 10 years, our decisions have become easier and easier to understand. But they are not, pixie books. They are not for children. It's not children's language. It is grown-up language. And there are people who will not understand it, and that's how it is. So I'm not saying, there's a lower barrier also there that you should not trespass. So that's the internal thing. What can we do when we write our judgments? What else can we do? Maybe we can ask ourselves, what can we do for the journalists? They can obviously do a lot of things for us because they can write a lot about what we do with our decisions. But what can we do for them? Well, like I said, maybe we should start understanding what the conditions they are working in, under what conditions. Now, 10 years ago, there would be, in Denmark at least, every newspaper would have its own court recorder. And he would know a lot about the system and the judiciary, and he would understand a lot about the cases because he would be in court all the time. In Denmark nowadays, you don't see that anymore. The requirements for a journalist is that he should put out at least 3 stories a day. That in itself is pretty harsh. He cannot spend all his time in court. Tomorrow he will be at the hospital, and the day after he will be at the economic, political situation, or whatever it is, environmental business. So he must cover a lot of things now. He is not the specialist because his working conditions are not for that. So what we can do, I think, is understanding that we must be very speedy because he must be speedy. So he must deliver a message very often 1 minute from the time that you deliver your judgment. He must press the button. So there's no time for him to go back and deliberate and consider and ponder and then write his article. He has almost already written it. So the second you pass your judgment, he will go out with something. Is he a bad person? I don't know. But is it this his working conditions? Yes, it is. So what can we do to help him? And what maybe we could do is understanding that if we make a court docket before we actually pass the sentence, so when we pass the sentence, we simultaneously also pass out a court docket with a brief summary and a resume of the case, and a brief summary with a headline, the neutral, we're not making the fast news here, but neutrally describing what the case is about and what articles were involved. It will facilitate him and his work a little better. And maybe, just maybe, if we're a little bit lucky, there will come a better article out of that with fewer faults and fewer fails, so that maybe the public would be able to discuss it on a more sound basis than if we had not. And the reason that I have a picture of the ambulance is I'm just adhering to the fact that could you imagine if we got into the ambulance and the ambulance didn't have the heart disease pump where it usually was? We would all go wrong, in a wrong direction. So my point is here, if we prepare the docket up front before we pass the sentence and deliver it simultaneously, then maybe then the journalist can actually use it, and maybe then we can enhance the things that are being written about our decisions and our judgments. We made in Denmark also a little book, and it was because we found that the journalist, there was some potential for being accurate, and we thought maybe we could help them. So we made this book, And it's called Pretty Good to Know for a Journalist When Going to Court. And we described in this book, it's very, very easy reading. This is almost like a children's book, actually, and it's purposely written like this, so it's very easy to find your way around. And it states what are the rights for the journalist, how can he find information, where can he say something, where can he find the judgments, etc., etc. And so when we had made it, we asked 10 journalists if they would read it and answer us if there was anything missing, and answer us if they could use it. And they read it, and they came back and they said, very good, we will use it very much, we're very, very, very happy. But are you going to do this in a book? And we were, yes. And they're like, my God, we would never ever use a book. How do you think we could use a book? We're sitting in the courtroom. Do you think we could remember to bring this book around? You must make it online. So because of that, we knew, and we had not published it yet, we had only the manuscript ready, we knew that we had to alter what we did. And so we made a website, and we waited 6 more months, because that's how long it took. But then it came out, and it's become one of the best tools that the journalists have. And I know, because I track it every month, I can see how many times people are going on the website, so I can see how much it's being used. And the figures are, of course, not millions and millions, because Denmark is a very small country, and there are very few journalists. But considering the size and everything, I think it's proven very worthwhile. I think I should end, or no? Good. Another example, can you work through the TV? Can you work with broadcasts? And sometimes in Denmark you cannot avoid it. You cannot avoid it because a journalist will cover the cases or make a documentary about a big case, and that's how it is. Sometimes you actually maybe have something that you want to state. And we tried that. We were thinking, if we want knowledge to perceive, and if we want the Danish people to appreciate what we do and the role, remember the first thing we talked about, how do we gain respect? Maybe by telling also what we do and all the good things we do and the value that we provide. So one of the biggest areas for us are cases with the bailiff's court, because a lot of people cannot pay their bills, and when they cannot pay the bills, they go to the bailiff's court. So we have about 700,000 cases in Denmark per year, and I would say between 300,000 and 400,000 of them are bailiff's court cases. So the reasoning I'm telling you this is, a lot of Danish people can see themselves in bailiff's cases because they know someone who couldn't afford to pay their bill, or they know, their aunt couldn't afford. They know it resonates with them. And so we went to a broadcast company and we said, you're making all these documentaries serious. What about making one from the bailiff's court? And they were like, why not? And so we set it up, and it was strenuous and difficult, and there were complications, and there were agreements to be made, and everyone, of course, in the individual case had to agree that it was okay. And it was a lot of work. But out came 10 very good TV hours showing how a bailiff court works. And more than half of the population in Denmark have seen at least one of these shows. And they thought it was very, very interesting. Now, was it worth it? I think so. If you ask the judges, was it worth it? I honestly think most of them would say yes, it was. I think there would be one or two who said, oh my God, it was really, really strenuous and difficult, and it took so much time. But a lot of them were also proud, because we are proud of what we are and what we do and the role that we play, and we want to share it if it can be done in terms and conditions that guarantee the privacy and the respect of rights and everything, so everything must be okay. So TV production is just another example of ways that you could communicate. And there are things that you could be proactive about, and there are things that you cannot be proactive about, but that you just have to reactively do something when others do it, what will you do then? We also decided to go on YouTube, so we have a YouTube channel, and that's with messages like this for the individual. If he has an affinity to learn about the justice system, he can go on and look. Also you, but it's in Danish. We have various groups that comes to our courts, and some of them are more vulnerable than others. One very vulnerable group are youngsters. They don't understand what's happening. And we had a very, very sad story about that, because one of the social workers who communicated with the person that was going to trial, he told us afterwards that he went in a taxi with this person, and the youngster said, "What's actually going to happen?" And he explained what was going to happen, and they came to court, and they came in the court, and they sat down, and the trial went on, and he gave testimony, and the sentence was passed, and the social worker took the youngster back to the place where he lived in the taxi. And here comes the sad part. Because one thing is that the youngster asked him up front when they were going to court, but the sad thing was that when they sat in a taxi after a very strenuous case and very heartfelt case, the youngster asked the social worker, "Could you please explain to me what happened?" And that was a very serious lesson for us. And what we did was we developed tons of things out of that. One thing was a little movie directed towards youngsters so that they would know what happens in court when they go there. And obviously, when they come to the court, it's too late. So we had to ask the police, and we had to ask social workers and the communities and many other people if they could have the goodness and the graciousness to share it on our behalf. Because we have it on our YouTube channel, but no one sees that. So the only way for us to get the message out at the appropriate time, which was before they hit the court case, the courtroom, was through other people. So we had to work through other people to get the message out there. This is the second last slide. I think there are 4 sentences in this slide. 2 of them are affirmative. It's a proactive statement. The courts secure order, and without order there can be no growth. I honestly believe this to be true for all of us working within the judiciary. The other one, I also, by the same token, I state to you that this is the truth, and that is that the courts are protection for the individual. I think that those 2 sentences, a lot of Danish people could not say those, and they would not know it. I think we have an opportunity to communicate those sentences out, because if we do, more people will actually appreciate the value that we contribute. So that's the first 2 sentences. The last 2 sentences are a little bit more reactive, and it's sentences to show and explain what we do and who we are, so that not to be misunderstood. And the first one goes, "When you rise for the judge, you rise for justice." Now, why is that important? It is important because a lot of Danish people, and I'm not only talking about the youngsters of the Danish youngsters, I'm also talking about the grown-ups. For them, it's old-fashioned, it's not paying respect, it's a little bit, maybe even a little bit ridiculous. It's why should I rise for you? Are you better than me? It does not necessarily give good associations. So I think it is important that we tell that the reason that you should rise for the judge is not because of the person, it's because of the justice. So it's the profession that you rise on behalf of, it's not the person. And I think it's a good idea to communicate that. And the last one, the same. I'm not actually aware of how it is in Portugal, but in Denmark, once you are appointed judge, you cannot be fired. Is it the same in Portugal? Yes. Now again, through a difficult, well, more or less, you can, but it's very, very difficult. Yes.
Of course.
So in Denmark, when you go through an economic crisis, lots of people get laid off, lots of people are without work, lots of people are within risk of losing their job, lots of people become insecure. A very natural thought would be, what is it with you judges? What is it that makes you so special? Why can you not? Why should I go around being so insecure? Why are you not? So again, the story behind that, I think that's a necessary thing for us to communicate about. It's not because of us as persons. It's because this is a protection for them as individuals. So those 4 statements would be sort of the ending show. We have, because the language is so difficult sometimes to talk in, we have actually made a cartoon. And the cartoon says some of those 4 statements that I've just said. And that's also on YouTube. And it's with English subtitles, so this time you actually can see it. I think it's not time enough for me to show it, but it says, it explains how we work, and it explains, among other things, these 4 sentences so that you could understand them. Thank you very much for your time.